It is July 16th, 2019. This is episode 2 of Roostertail Talk. My name is David Newton. Welcome back for the second episode. This is a Minisode. Something I call Minisode is a mini podcast episode. And this is an idea given to me by my producer, Rachel, or better known as my wife, Rachel Newton. And I think it's a great idea she had, and I really appreciate her support with this podcast and her contributions. This is going to be a fun, shorter episode that we're going to do, and we're going to focus on a few different things. So in this episode, we're going to answer some questions that listeners sent out. I appreciate getting those questions. We're also going to share some stories with you that the listeners sent to me, and we're also going to define a terminology used with hydroplane racing. So get comfortable, sit back, and welcome to Roostertail Talk. All right, well, welcome to the second episode of Roostertail Talk. As I said in the intro, this is a mini-sode. It's a mini podcast episode. I really appreciate all the positive feedback people have been sending in. I've gotten a lot of emails and private messages about people enjoying the podcast and the message I'm sending out there of hydroplanes. So that gives me a little bit more drive to keep this going and put a little bit more of my heart and soul into this. Talking with a lot of friends, I've got a lot of great ideas. Got a lot of ideas for people I want to interview coming up here. I've reached out to quite a few drivers. I'm going to be doing some interviews at the Columbia Cup. I'm going to be doing some interviews later this week, and hoping to do some in between Columbia Cup and Seafair as well. So I hope to get a lot of content to have some great episodes coming up at the end of July here and through August about the hydroplane circuit right now. And once I get through that, I'll probably shift gears and focus more on the history of the sport and talk to some people who were around years ago, decades ago in the aspect. Just get some knowledge and some stories from them. Can never hear enough stories around the sport. So anyways, today I'm just going to do a few things here, get some content out to you, because I've been really anxious to get another episode out, even though I haven't had a chance to interview anyone yet. I do promise I will have an interview for the next episode. It is lined up. I just have to wait for that. I know I did promise it for episode 2, but I thought this is a pretty good idea to have just a shorter episode every once in a while, and to have the opportunity to share some of the stories I got from listeners, answer questions, and also to define something around the sport. So I'm going to start us off with some questions I got from a few listeners. I got a question earlier in the week that asked me, how often will a new podcast be released? So my goal for this is to have a new episode every 2 weeks, minimum. This is all dependent on my time. Right now, I'm on summer break. I don't have to work. I just have to play dad during the day. So it gives me a big range of things to do. So I really plan to get a lot done before I go back to school, so that I know I will make these deadlines and get an episode out every 2 weeks for you. But I'll try to be very transparent with everyone so they know what to expect and when to expect it. But I would say over the next few weeks, I'll probably will be producing more than one every 2 weeks, because there's so much going on right now with the test session coming up this week and the Columbia Cup and Seafair. So that's the answer for that question. The second question I got is, will the podcast only be focusing on unlimited hydroplanes? So right now, my main focus is unlimiteds, but I'm not going to stop with unlimiteds. I want to branch out, talk to drivers, owners, crew members, for people who are associated with other classes of hydroplanes. I'm really intrigued with the Grand Prix class, and I'm really intrigued with the racing done in Valleyfield. I've just heard so many positive things about the races and some of the videos and pictures I've seen from that over there. I think I might make that a goal of mine to visit that here the next few years. But I really hope to interview anyone who's related to hydroplanes, period. But Unlimited is my dream class, so I will be talking a lot about them, but I'll try not to focus just on that, so we can get other content out there for you guys and gals. All right, so if you have other questions you want to send me, I can answer for you. Please send me an email. My email is roostertailtalk@gmail.com. That's ROOSTERTAILTALK Yeah, if you have any questions about the podcast, what to expect, questions about hydroplanes you want me to answer on another podcast, please send them my way, and I'll do my best to get the information relayed out to you and out to the world here with this. And if you have any suggestions as well, please send them my way. I would love to hear some suggestions. I had some great emails from a few individuals who had some suggestions of people to interview, and a couple I had already planned out, but I had a couple that didn't cross my mind yet, but really intrigued me. So I will be pursuing that here this year. Well, I'm feeling a bit nostalgic. I really appreciate the listeners that took the time to send in some memories for me. Really interesting stuff here. Some things that were before my time that I wish I could have enjoyed the experience as well, but that's all right. We all have our own experiences, and I get to kind of live through your examples and your stories. That's part of the reason why we have this show, so we can get the stories out there, and you can feel like it's a little bit a part of yourself as well. So the first person who emailed me was my friend Fred Olson from Lake Tapps, Washington. And he emailed me a pretty long list of memories. He has some great memories growing up around the Seattle area. And the first one he shared with me was in 1973. He remembers being dropped off at his grandparents' house on the Rainier Beach area. And that seafair, it was really, really cold. It was cloudy and rainy. It was really miserable out there. His parents went down to watch the races in person, but didn't feel that it was okay for him and his brother John to brave the weather conditions, and it was better for them to stay back at their grandparents' house. They could see out of the window, looking through the Seward Park Gap. They could see the Roostertails, and they could hear the sounds of the Merlins and the Allisons roaring across the lake. He wanted to be there in person so badly, and his brother John did as well. But they didn't get to go down that day. But they were able to go earlier in the week when the weather was a bit better and see some qualifying and testing, which started on Wednesday. Now they have a short session or two on Friday, but they would battle it out all week trying to qualify and get that top spot. Then the next year, his second one, the weather was great, but the race was moved to Sand Point, but it was the Gold Cup, so it was the big event of the year, and there was a lot of things happening in that race. But unfortunately, the Union 95, which was his favorite boat, blew a hot section, and that was before that they knew they had to put containment blankets around the hot sections to prevent further damages. But it blew a hole in the bottom of the boat, and it sank to the bottom. So he witnessed his favorite boat basically be destroyed in front of him, and he also witnessed the last Miss US catch fire and burn down to the waterline. So there was a lot of events happening that day, and it actually went pretty late because of all the carnage and destruction. The last one is probably my favorite on his list. It was springtime 1977. His brother and him were in school, and they were surprised when the school got a call from his mom that they had to leave, and he didn't know what was going on. But his mom came, picked his brother John up, and as they left, they could hear a roar of a hydroplane running across the lake, and it was only a mile or so from the lake. they knew then what was going on. So she took him down to the pits, Stan Sayers pits, and they got to see, for the very first day when it was christened, the brand new Atlas van lines, the Blue Blaster, testing on Lake Washington with Bill Munsey. They got to see the very last run. They got to see it on the water. Beautiful brand new boat. And after the run, we're looking around, checking the boat out. Once the boat was on the trailer, Bill Munsey noticed him and his brother, and Bill Munsey came over and gave him a whole tour, posed for pictures, answered questions about the boat, showed him everything that was new on the boat. They got a great picture, John on one side, Fred on the other, with Bill Munsey in front of the boat, and so that's probably his kind of crown jewel memory of a very special day, and that's a cool picture. Hopefully Fred will show me that one day. That's pretty cool. And I remember those test sessions on Lake Washington. Those were kind of magical days. I saw a lot of fun things down there, people experimenting different things. My dad and mom would let me skip every once in a while to go down and see the test sessions. But there was one time they wouldn't let me go down, and I was really mad about it. I had a math test. So they said I had to go to school so I could take the math test, even though I had a good grade, but whatever. But it was 2000, and that was the day when Russ Wicks set the propeller-driven water speed record with a Miss Free Eye. And I really wanted to be down there and see it and witness it. And back then, I didn't have a cell phone. Teachers had computers, but we didn't have laptops or really any access to see what was going on. There's no Facebook. We didn't even have MySpace back then. So we didn't have access to see what was going on or hear what was going on. So it was a long day of school for me before I got home, and my mom told me what happened because she got a phone call from Dad. But it was only 19 years ago. I think I'd let that drop by now, but whatever. All right, so thank you, Fred, for sending those in. Those were some pretty fun stories. The next one, and I apologize, Mark, if I mispronounce your last name. I am a school teacher, so you'd think I'd be able to pronounce names easily, but I always warn the kids I'm going to mispronounce a few of them. But Matt D'Amito, I'll go with that one, Matt D'Amito. He sent me a pretty cool story. He was another Seattle kid. Grew up in the 60s and made wooden hydroplanes that towed behind his bikes, raced with his friends out in the streets. And he remembers the races broadcast being broadcasted on all three channels, Como, King, and Cairo. All three channels were out there televising the races, so he knew he could always catch up on the action. Later on, as he became an adult in the 70s and 80s, he was a police officer for the city of Kent, which is just south of Seattle, for those not around here. And at that time, Ron Jones, he had his own shop at South Central Avenue, and he was cranking out new holes and repairing existing ones all the time. He had a busy shop back then. He was doing a lot of work for a lot of different teams, and not just unlimiteds, but other classes, 5 liters and inboards. But Fran's Muncie team had their shop up on the north end, and he could remember during the springtime and summer especially, making excuses to do extra patrols around the shops and be in the area just in case a police officer was needed. I'm sure there was a lot of people that he had to keep an eye on, right? But he would get the chance, he had any chance to talk with the crew members about the hulls, what's going on with the team. But he can remember those poor guys putting in a lot of late nights at the shops, and that's true. There's a lot of late nights with hydroplane racing. It takes a lot of hours to get these boats out on the water. Most people don't understand how much it really takes to get them going. But yeah, there's a lot of late nights. So that's really cool. I like that story. I've been around a lot of shops as well. It's funny to see the quality of the shops. I think how the shops are set up, it reflects the team in general. There's a lot of shops out there that were pristine, like Budweiser. That was the top shop, right? They always wanted a floor so clean you could eat off of it. And there were some other shops out there that once you walked in the doors, you just wondered how they got the boat on the water. I'm not going to name names, but there were some rough ones out there. All right, thank you, Mark, for that one. I appreciate your story. The next story from Chad Pritchard. Now, Chad, he lives in Granite Falls, Washington now, but he was originally from Madison, Indiana. And as a kid, he was only 4 months old, but when he was 4 months old, he got to go to his first regatta. That was because his grandparents and parents were volunteers for the regatta at that time, so he had good access to the races, and it's a big area for racing. So he was lucky enough to be brought to the races and have a good experience with that. But his earliest experiences were of his Miss Madison, his hometown boat. And he remembers getting his picture taken with his grandfather in front of the 1971 Miss Madison. And what's special about that was that they had the Gold Cup in Madison that year, and the Miss Madison won the race. Huge victory for the Madison team. And they said he still has that picture to this day, and it's one of his all-time favorite pictures and moments. Then he fast forwards to 1988 when the Miss Madison had a brand new hull built for them by Ron Jones, and I believe that was the first hull they had built for the team. I think every boat before that was purchased as a used boat, but that was their first. Yeah, so that was their first brand new hull, and he was helping his mother with a public event and a fundraiser. So everyone could come out and see the boat and raise money for the team. He said he went to the dentist earlier in the morning, ended up getting sick. After he got sick, he said he threw up in the gutter a few times, felt better, and then he proceeded to eat his body weight in hot dogs. Yeah, that's very memorable, right? And I have to admit, I did pretty much the same thing with myself in '92 when the Coors Dry had a test session on Lake Washington. They were giving out free hot dogs to anyone who wanted them, and I ate my body weight in it, and then I proceeded to throw it all up. And I don't think I touched a hot dog for at least 10 years after that. But he remembers when he was a kid, Chad. He remembers going to the Madison shop while they're working on boats, crawling all over the boat, going through the cockpit, using the escape hatch, sitting around the boat, and just hanging out with the team. So being around that just really grew his love for the sport and hydroplanes. He said he has so many more memories, but one other one he wanted to bring up was in San Diego when the Madison team won in 1993. They were the Frosted Flakes team then. They were sponsored by the Frosted Flakes cereal, and they won from the trailer position. That was another big win for the team, and he said they actually had a parade after that win, so that's pretty cool to be a part of a parade and see that in your hometown. That's really cool. All right, the last one I'm going to share today is from another friend, Matt Sanders. He's from Duvall, Washington. He was born 1964. Lived in the Leschi area. And anytime he heard the sound of thunder, he would head down to the pits, head down to the lake, and see what was going on. He says his lifelong friend, Bill McGraw, lived not too far from there and helped him with his love of the sport and got him into racing RC hydroplanes with the club Electric Thunder. That was back in the early 90s. He went off to join the Air Force, and he came back in around 2008 and joined another club called Classic Thunder, and they race 1/10 scale unlimited hydroplanes, are all electric powered, and he's still racing today. In fact, I raced with him just a couple days ago at the Classic Thunder Gold Cup, so that was fun seeing him there. But from those memories, he says he just has a passion for the sport and loves everything about it. Well, I appreciate you sharing your stories with me, Matt and Chad, Mark and Fred. Appreciate seeing those. If anyone else has any out there that you want to share with me, please send them my way, and love to hear them and share them out with everyone out there in the hydro world. So this last part for the Minisode today, I want to do this every once in a while. I want to define a part of the sport of hydroplane racing. For those new people out there who like it, want to know more about it, but maybe are a little timid to ask what that's about. And I'm going to start off with a pretty basic concept, Roostertail. I'm going to talk about Roostertail. It's in our name of our podcast, so I thought that'd be pretty appropriate to start off with that and define that for everyone out there. And it's not going to be a big scientific definition that you would find in some sort of science book. This is just it'll get you by. How about that? This will get you by. So, a Roostertail, basically it's the water spray, the white water spray that you see behind the hydroplane as it's traveling at speed. And these boats go really fast. They go upwards of 200 miles an hour down the straightaways. Their Roostertails can be up to 300 feet long. There's a propeller that's traveling underneath the hull, rotating, and pushes water out. It creates this beautiful, beautiful spray of water. And it can be very, very beautiful. It is a beautiful thing. But it's also a dangerous thing. Right? It's pushing a lot of water. It pushes tons of water, an enormous amount of force. And it can be devastating for another racecraft out there on the course. There's a lot of examples of Roostertails causing damage to other boats out there, but the one I can think of off the top of my head is in 1982 at the World Championships in Clear Lake, Texas. They had in the final heat, the 82 Squire was a little bit behind the field going into the first turn, and Bob Patterson's U80, I believe it was driven by Ron Armstrong that year, was on the outside, came in on the field and cut off the Squire shop, and it caused a lot of damage, mainly to the cockpit area. I believe it tore off the windshield, tore apart some of the cockpit area, the cowling, Tom D's visor, and I think it beat him up a little bit because it's a ton amount. It's a lot of force and pressure from that water. They can do damage pretty quickly. And you don't think water could do damage like that, right? But when it's being thrown at you at that speed with that force, it'll do some good damage. Then skipping forward a few years, I just have to think about the Bubble Bud and Bernie Little and Jeff Neff's contribution to the sport of introducing the canopy enclosed cockpit for the drivers. And that got a really good test in Syracuse, New York in '85. In another final heat, the Bud got cut off in the similar scenario. It was probably actually a little bit worse too because the Budweiser rode up on the Roostertail and hung there for a little bit before it came down successfully, landed. But with that enclosure, Jim Crotfeld was safe from the water. He still had visibility. He didn't get any injuries, and he went on to win that final heat because of the canopy. So maybe if the technology was only a few years earlier, Tommy wouldn't have had such a bad outcome. And I'm not sure how much injury Tom Deeth got from that accident in '82, but I know it wasn't good, to say the least. But also, with Roostertails, they can also cause boats to flip. And the latest example of that was last year's Seafair, 2018. Alberto had lane one on the first lap of the final heat. And they all went to the first turn together. I think they came out about 4 wide. And as they went down that backstretch, you could see Alberto was falling back little by little, and the field was pulling away from him. And as they got to the corner, the U11 pinched down onto lane one, and the Alberto couldn't hold its lane. It went up the Roostertail, and it flipped. It went all the way around to 360. It landed right side up, but from the force of that flip and that accident, it did a lot of damage, and that team's not racing this year because of the damage that was caused at that race. So it can be dangerous, that's for sure. But one last thing I want to talk about with Roostertails. A lot of crew members have paid attention to the Roostertails over the years because, believe it or not, you can actually tell a lot of efficiency being produced by the hydroplane by the shape the height, the length of the Roostertail. It's a good tell all. It's a giveaway for some different things with the Hydroplane, whether the balance is right, some of the hydrodynamics is right, the prop efficiency, etc. But the Roostertail can tell if the boat is efficiently pushing the power or if there's a problem with things going on with the boat. So if you go down to Tri-Cities this year, Seafair, and you're watching qualifying, just think about that as you watch the Roostertails come off the hydroplanes. And I think I've always been told that the longest and lowest Roostertail is the most efficient out there. So just think about that as you watch the boats, especially in qualifying, because that's the best water conditions there. You may not get as much of that in racing conditions, but just keep that in mind. So, with this hydro definition and terminology, if you have some part of the hydroplane world that you're not sure about, you want me to clarify it a little bit more for you, or at least bring you closer to knowing what it is or how it works, send me an email or message me on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or send me an email to roostertailtalk@gmail.com, and I can try and on the next Minisode define that for you, give you a better understanding of what that is. It could be something that I said in this broadcast about maybe the propeller, or if you want to know about something, how something works on the hydroplane. It could be part of the boat itself. It could be part of the racing rules, clarifications, how the starting procedures work. If you have any questions, send them my way, and I'll enlighten with what I can you about those. But I'd love to hear them. So please send me an email if you got anything. Now, before I end this mini-sode, I want to talk about one thing before we got closer to the Tri-Cities Columbia Cup. If you haven't checked it out online, there's actually a hydroplane fantasy racing league out there. It's called Deck to Deck. It's DECK, the number 2, DECK. I believe it's .us. And it's a fantasy league all about hydroplane racing. You sign up on there and you make your picks race by race. So it's a fun way to play and follow the sport a little bit more, and just just have a little more fun with the racing that's going on. I did my picks for the first 2 races. I chose, I believe, Home Street Bank for the first race and Graham Trucking for the Gold Cup. I thought they would have a little bit better showing at the Gold Cup, so I chose those are my picks for the first 2 races. I'm only about 400 points back from the leader, so I'm not too far off. But it's fun to talk with your friends about and just give you a little bit of more of a taste of the racing season. So check it out. That's my recommendation for the day. All right, well, that's all I have for this mini-sode. I hope you enjoyed it. I plan to have more of these out in the future. Mainly it will be on listener request for more information about hydroplanes and hydroplane racing. Please let me know you're listening out there, you're enjoying this. Hit that subscribe button on the podcast player or app that you're using. Once you subscribe to the podcast, you'll get notifications on any new episodes we have and are released. Also, don't forget to check us out on social media for updates and hydro news. That's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I promise, the next episode we will have an interview. I'm going to be interviewing Jeff Bernard this week, as well as some others. I might be interviewing someone closely related to that racing team as well. So stay tuned for that. I'll also be interviewing people at the Columbia Cup. I'm excited about that. I hope you are as well. So until next time, I hope to see you at the races.